On at least a few occasions, people have asked me about the whole idea of moto-camping, of setting up camp in remote places, and whether I'm ever afraid of being robbed. The simple answer is yes, of course. It is something that's at the back of my mind or at the front of my mind. But this is a story of an experience that gave me a lot of perspective about this particular aspect. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Rohith. You know me here as Toll-Free Traveler. And today's story is another interesting experience I had on my Chennai to Ladakh ride in 2016. In fact, this is almost, I think, just one day after the incident that I last shared with you, the ride from Kishtwar to Daksum. And the day after that, we rode on further into Kashmir. We went to Anantnag. We intended to stay there, spend some time there, but the town was in curfew and under a lockdown of some sort. So we decided, okay, what's the next best place we can go nearby? We saw Aru Valley, which is very close to Anantnag, and it's a little bit higher altitude. Also a national park. Some part of it at least is a national park. So we rode into the national park and we went to the main tourist area. There's a little market, or it was a little market at least in 2016. And we looked at places to stay over there. Everything seemed like very cramped. Aru Valley is beautiful. It's a beautiful part of Kashmir. Probably one of the more beautiful parts I've seen till now, Ladakh aside. And so it seemed criminal to stay in a cramped, tiny, typical tourist guest house when I was in a place like that. So Karthik who's with me, and I spoke about it, and we were like, listen, let's look for a slightly better place to stay, some place with a better view maybe. And on our way to this particular market area, we'd seen that the road runs at a height and there's a deep valley below, and there was this beautiful river flowing through. So we were like, let's go back and let's try to see whether we can find something closer to that river or with that view of the valley and the river. So we rode back, and as we were going, we noticed this one building way down below, which looked like it might be a hotel. So we found a little road that took us all the way down, went there, and sure enough, it was a hotel. We walked in and we asked them, whether they have rooms and what the price would be. Unfortunately for us, they said there was like 4,000 or 5,000 rupees a night, which was way out of our budget. We were on a shoestring budget for this trip, and the idea was in fact to camp as often as possible and sometimes stay in hotels, very simple accommodation. We were both like, man, I really don't want to go back and stay in that market area. Imagine how amazing it would be if we could just pitch our tents over here near the river and camp. So as we walked out of the gate of this hotel, we saw this one person standing on the other side of the road. He was just looking at the bikes. There were a whole bunch of goats and sheep around him, and he was just staring at the bike. So Karthik went up to him and spoke to him for a little while, and then he came back to me and he was like, listen, I don't know exactly what he's saying because I don't understand, but I think he's saying that we can camp over here. So then I went back to talk to him. He spoke some form of Kashmiri dialect with little bits of Hindi. My Hindi is not necessarily great, but I can get by. So we had like this broken communication where I tried to tell him what we wanted, and I was trying to ask him whether this land that he was saying we could camp on, whether it was his land or whether it's government land, because we were also inside a national park. And he kept telling me, this is our land, this is our land, you can stay over here. And then I tried explaining to him that we're going to put up tents and we're going to stay here for the whole night. But he didn't seem too flustered. He was just like, yeah, you can stay here. It seemed perfectly normal to him. It was surprising how easily he agreed for us to stay there. So I wasn't entirely sure whether he actually understood what we were saying, but we decided, okay, only one way to find out. And he opened up this little fence. There was one fence over there. He opened it up a bit so that we could take our bikes through And then he was just like, put up your tents anywhere. We rode as close to the river as we would dare. We wanted to keep a little bit of distance because always it's better to stay a little bit away from a water body when you're pitching tent. And we parked the bikes, found our spot, started unloading the bikes. He had come there and he was just watching us do every single thing. It is typical wherever I've gone for people there to be as curious about me as I am about them. I think that's very natural. So I was used to that happening, but his level of attention was something else. He wanted to know about almost every single thing that I was taking off my bike, how much it costs, where I got it. There were a lot of questions, could be considered completely innocent, but it's also not the kind of information you want to be sharing when you know you're pitching tent in a totally random place. So it was a little bit weird, but eventually when we had set up our tents, he went off somewhere. So we were left to ourselves. We went down to the river, washed up, freshened up, got out of our riding gear, changed, got comfortable, basically settled down. This place was absolutely stunning. The river, and we were right in the middle of a valley. It was just phenomenal. But very quickly, like maybe 15-20 minutes after we'd settled in, there was this huge cloud front that moved in, and we knew the rain was coming. So we jumped into our tents, put on the waterproof layers on top and jumped into our tents, and sure enough the skies opened up. It started pelting rain. It was an insane downpour. Must have been some kind of crazy cloud burst, but quite a long one. I think like 15 or 20 minutes after the rain started, I suddenly heard footsteps around the tent, and there was a man's voice, and he was screaming out random names of other men. And then beyond a point he suddenly started saying, "Get out of your tent, come out." And we were, well, in the middle of nowhere. We had just randomly pitched tents. We didn't entirely know whether we had permission to be there or not, and we didn't know how safe it was. And there had been this person who was asking so many questions about everything that we had with us. I didn't know how many people were outside, and they wanted us to come out. So obviously, what was going through my mind at that point was, you've done it successfully, Rohith. You have put yourself in that situation where you are going to be robbed. This is the moment when you lose everything. Karthik's tent was next to mine. Both of us were obviously up because we could hear the screaming and we could hear someone walking around, at least one person. This whole thing happened very fast, but within a minute we realized that, listen, this fabric over us, this tent is not going to protect us from anything or anyone apart from the rain. And we just need to get out and figure out what's happening. So we spoke in Tamil. I told him, Seri, I'm going to get out. I got out of the tent, and to my complete surprise, Rashid, who's the person who told us we could camp over there, was over there. He had a manvetti, we call it a manvetti, but basically something to dig the ground, and he was digging the ground. That is what the thudding and thumping was, to create a stream for the water to flow away from our tents. I have never felt more foolish than I felt at that minute, because I realized that these preconceived notions that I brought with me from this land so far away had led me to come up with this whole story in my own head. But when I stepped out to see what the reality was, here was someone who knew nothing about us, had given us permission to camp on his land, and the only thing he was doing while it was pelting rain was to wrap a plastic sheet over himself and come out over here to find a way to get the water away from our tents so that we would be more comfortable. And meanwhile, what we were doing sitting inside our tents is wondering whether we were going to be robbed. Obviously, that one moment completely changed the rest of the evening. In that moment, sometimes you're in a place where you have some fear, but there is this one thing that happens that makes you realize there is no reason to be afraid. And after that, you feel this complete sense of relief. That was this moment. And after that, we were just completely relaxed. We knew we were in the right place. We were safe. We were with the right person. And Rashid was phenomenal. He went back to that hotel where we had asked about whether we could stay. And he took their flask and cups and he made some chai at his house, and he brought us hot tea in a flask with cups to our campsite, gave us some tea, some rotis, and then he built a fire for us. And it was still drizzling quite a bit, so I didn't know that you could actually make a fire while it was still drizzling. But he told me the story about how there is this one type of wood that you get high up in the mountains, and he had a small piece of it, and if you put that deep inside your bonfire, it will light up all of the other wood and you will have a fire even when it's drizzling. And sure enough, he made this beautiful fire. It was actually surprising just how well that fire burned, even though it was drizzling. We were standing around it with umbrellas, and yet we had a fire which gave us so much warmth. It was beautiful. The rest of that evening was fantastic. His little kids came out. We were playing with them the whole evening. We just spent the whole evening talking in our broken communication, whatever language thing that was going on. And it was great fun. It was beautiful. It was very special. And it also made me realize that a lot of our fears can sometimes be completely misplaced. It's important to be cautious. It's important to think about what you're doing and assess the risk to a certain extent. But beyond a point, there's only so much you can do. And you're in that situation when everything seems like it's just going to fall apart. All you can do is step out and face the situation that you're in. And sometimes you just find yourself in the best place possible.